The massive Varden ship darkened the sky as it descended toward the designated landing zone. Government officials, military personnel, and news crews waited with bated breath. This was humanity's first official contact with an alien species. Lieutenant James Miller stood at attention beside General Howard and the diplomatic team. His palms were sweaty inside his dress gloves. After 15 years in the military, Miller thought he'd seen everything. He was wrong. The Varden ship's landing ramp extended with a hiss of hydraulics. Thick mist poured out, and through it emerged tall figures with broad shoulders and an unmistakable military bearing. The lead alien stepped forward, standing nearly 7 feet tall, with gray-blue skin covered in natural armor plates across the chest, shoulders, and forearms. 4 yellow eyes scanned the human delegation coldly. "I am Commander Trek of the Varden Imperium," the alien announced, voice surprisingly clear through the translation device. "We come to assess the potential of Earth as a trade partner or strategic ally." General Howard stepped forward. "On behalf of the United Earth Government, we welcome you. I am General Howard, and this is our diplomatic team." Trek's upper eyes narrowed. "You send military to greet us. Wise." Miller watched as Trek's gaze moved across the human delegation, seeming to evaluate each person. When those yellow eyes fell on him, Miller stood straighter. "Your warriors are small," Trek observed. "No natural armor. No claws." The alien's mouthparts shifted in what might have been amusement or disgust. "We compensate in other ways," General Howard replied evenly. The diplomatic team guided the Vardens to the meeting facility. Miller followed behind, noting how the alien warriors moved with practiced precision. They carried strange weapons that seemed part of their armor. Their movements were fluid despite their size. Inside the conference room, maps and data about Earth were displayed. The head diplomat, Dr. Bell, began her presentation. "Earth is home to over 8 billion humans and countless other species. Our civilization has—" "Your military capacity," Trek interrupted. "Tell us of your warriors, your weapons." Dr. Bell looked uncomfortable. "We hope to discuss cultural exchange first." "Culture is for the weak," Trek said. "Strength determines who leads and who follows in the galaxy. The Varden Imperium controls 12 star systems because our warriors are unmatched." General Howard stepped in. "Our military history spans thousands of years. We've developed many approaches to warfare." Trek made a sound like stones grinding together, apparently laughter. "You have survived this long without natural defenses. Impressive, but puzzling." Miller noticed one of the Varden warriors studying the humans with particular interest. This one had lighter skin patches and 3 scars across his faceplate. "Perhaps a demonstration would be beneficial," Trek suggested. "Show us your warriors in action, not just in these stiff uniforms." The diplomatic team exchanged glances. This wasn't in the planned agenda. "We could arrange a limited military exercise," General Howard offered cautiously. Trek's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Excellent. We will show you the might of Varden warriors, and you will show us how these soft-skinned creatures managed to build a civilization." The meeting continued for hours. The Vardens agreed to basic diplomatic protocols, but showed little interest in art, science, or commerce, unless it related to military applications. As the first day of talks concluded, Miller overheard Trek speaking to his second-in-command. "These humans seem weak individually. No wonder they build so many machines to fight for them. Still, they control this entire planet. There must be more to them than appears." The second-in-command nodded. "Perhaps they are more dangerous than they look." "We shall see," Trek replied. "Tomorrow's demonstration will reveal their true nature. If they are weak, the Imperium will know how to proceed." Miller watched them board their ship for the night. He couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was being tested, and that failing wasn't an option. The morning sun glinted off the Varden ship as military personnel from both species gathered at the testing grounds. A mile-wide section of desert had been cleared and prepared for what Commander Trek called a friendly demonstration of capabilities. Lieutenant Miller arrived early with General Howard. They watched as Varden warriors unloaded equipment from their ship. The aliens moved with practiced efficiency, setting up strange devices that hummed with energy. "I don't like this," General Howard muttered. "They're pushing us into a corner." Miller nodded. "They want to see us fight, sir. They're measuring us." "Well, we can't show them everything. Orders from the top. Reveal enough to earn respect, but keep our best tech classified." Commander Trek approached, his armored body casting a long shadow across the sand. Two warriors flanked him, carrying a large metal container between them. "General Howard," Trek said with a slight bow of his head, "we are prepared to begin the demonstration. Are your warriors ready?" "Almost," Howard replied. "May I ask what you plan to show us?" Trek's four eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture Miller was beginning to recognize as satisfaction. "The pride of Varden military might," Trek said. "Our living weapons." The metal container trembled, and a low growl emerged from within. Miller felt the hair on his arms stand up. "Living weapons?" Howard asked. "The Razor Claw," Trek explained. "Bioengineered battle beasts. For 8 generations, we have perfected them. They respond only to Varden commanders and can tear through battle armor like paper." General Howard maintained his poker face. "Impressive. We look forward to seeing them in action." Trek tilted his head. "And what will humans demonstrate?" "We have a specialized unit arriving shortly," Howard said. "One of our elite K9 teams." K9. Trek's translator seemed to struggle with the term. "You'll see," Miller said, earning a sharp glance from his superior. An hour later, the demonstration area was ready. Targets, obstacles, and sensor equipment filled the field. High-ranking officials from both species sat in a viewing area, while drones recorded everything from above. Commander Trek stepped onto a platform. "Today we show the strength of our peoples." His voice boomed through translators. "First, the Varden Imperium presents our champion." The metal container was brought forward and placed at the start of the obstacle course. Two warriors carefully opened it from behind, then quickly backed away. "Unleash the beast," Trek commanded. The container's door fell open, and a nightmarish creature lunged out. Standing 4 feet tall at the shoulder, it resembled a cross between a reptile and an insect. 6 muscular limbs propelled it forward, while its elongated head featured multiple rows of serrated teeth. Plates of natural armor covered vital areas, and its tail ended in a wicked spike. The Razor Claw paused, sniffing the air with slits along its jaw. Then Trek pressed something on his wrist guard. The beast's eyes glowed red, and it charged into the obstacle course. Miller watched in horrified fascination as the creature tore through reinforced barriers, leaped 20 feet into the air, and shredded target dummies with terrifying precision. It moved with both savage fury and calculated efficiency, destroying everything in its path. When it reached the end of the course, Trek pressed his wrist device again. The Razor Claw immediately froze, then trotted back to stand beside its master. "This is but one of our junior specimens," Trek announced proudly. "A full battalion of mature Razor Claws can clear an enemy city in hours." The human officials murmured among themselves. Even General Howard looked unsettled. Trek turned toward the humans. "Now show us your K9 unit that you believe worthy of comparison." Miller checked his watch. Right on time, a helicopter appeared on the horizon. As it landed, he couldn't help smiling. "Lieutenant," General Howard said quietly, "is your man ready?" "Yes, sir," Miller replied. "And so is Max." The helicopter's door slid open. A handler in tactical gear stepped out, followed by a German shepherd wearing a specialized vest. The dog stood alert, scanning the area with intelligent eyes. Trek stared at the animal, then at the humans. "This is your elite warrior, this small furry creature." Miller stepped forward. "Commander Trek, allow me to introduce you to one of our finest warriors. This is Max." The Varden warriors looked at each other in confusion. Their commander's 4 eyes narrowed in what could only be interpreted as disappointment or anger. "You mock us," Trek said flatly. "Not at all," Miller replied. "You're about to see what makes humans different from Vardans, and why you shouldn't underestimate us, or our best friends." The desert air shimmered with heat as Max stood at attention beside his handler, Sergeant Tom Wilson. The German shepherd's ears perked forward, his posture perfect despite the strange smells and unfamiliar beings surrounding him. Commander Trek moved closer, towering over the dog and his handler. The alien's 4 yellow eyes studied the pair with obvious skepticism. "This is your military asset?" Trek asked, mandibles clicking in what Lieutenant Miller had come to recognize as amusement, a primitive quadruped with fur. Wilson remained professional. "Sir, Max is a fully trained military working dog with 4 years of active service." Trek turned to his warriors, speaking in their native tongue. The translation devices picked up fragments, insulting our intelligence, and primitive pets as weapons. The Vardan warriors chuckled, a sound like rocks in a tumbler. One pointed at Max and made a slashing motion with his clawed hand. Max watched calmly, making no reaction to the provocation. General Howard stepped forward. "Commander Trek, perhaps a demonstration would help you understand." Trek gestured toward the obstacle course, still damaged from his Razor Claw's destructive path. "By all means, show us what your warrior can do." Wilson led Max to the starting position. The dog's focused gaze never wavered despite the lingering scent of the alien beast that had preceded him. "For the first demonstration," Wilson announced, "I'll show basic command structure and response time." What followed impressed even the human observers. Max responded instantly to voice commands, hand signals, and even subtle body language from Wilson. He healed, stayed in position during gunfire, and located hidden objects with remarkable speed. While the Razor Claw had powered through obstacles with brute force, Max navigated them with precision and intelligence. He scaled walls, crossed narrow beams, and crawled through confined spaces without hesitation. The Razor Claw destroyed those barriers, one Vardan warrior noted. "Your animal merely passes through them." "Destruction isn't always the objective," Miller replied. "Sometimes stealth and precision matter more than raw power." Trek's upper eyes narrowed. "Impressive agility, but where is the combat capability? Your beast has no natural weapons." Wilson nodded to Miller, who gave the signal to proceed with the next phase. "Max," Wilson commanded, "security alert." The change was immediate. The seemingly friendly dog transformed, his posture shifting to a protective stance. When a staff member in padded gear approached Wilson aggressively, Max launched forward with startling speed, taking down the attacker with controlled but overwhelming force. Even Trek took a step back. "Max is trained to use exactly the force needed," Wilson explained as he called the dog back. "No more, no less." The Vardans murmured among themselves, reassessing the animal before them. "But your beast is so small," Trek said, though with less dismissal in his tone. "Our Razor Claw could tear it apart." Miller stepped forward. "Size isn't everything, Commander. Max's true power lies in his partnership with humans. They work as a team." To demonstrate, Wilson put on a blindfold and allowed himself to be led into a section of the course that had been modified while he wasn't looking. With only verbal cues from Max, different patterns of barks, Wilson navigated through tripwires and around obstacles he couldn't see. "The dog is communicating?" asked one of the Vardan scientists who had joined the observers. "Yes," General Howard confirmed. "Dogs and humans have evolved together for thousands of years. They understand us in ways no other species can." Trek watched as Max alerted to a hidden explosive device, then led his handler safely around it. "Your Razor Claw obeys commands through technology and fear," Miller said quietly to Trek. "Max works with Sergeant Wilson through trust and a bond deeper than any control device." For the first time, Trek seemed genuinely intrigued rather than condescending. "What is the range of your control signal?" Trek asked. Wilson smiled. "There is no signal, Commander. No technology. Max chooses to work with me. Chooses. Trek's voice contained genuine surprise. That's the difference you're seeing, Miller explained. Your beast is unleashed. Ours is a partner. Trek watched as Max returned to Wilson's side, looking up at his handler with clear devotion. The commander's expression was unreadable, but his posture had changed. He was no longer dismissive. He was curious. I begin to see, Trek said slowly, that perhaps we have misunderstood humans in more ways than one. The sun climbed higher in the desert sky as the demonstration continued. Commander Trek had moved from the raised platform to stand closer to the training area, his 4 eyes fixed intently on Max and Sergeant Wilson. The other Varden warriors had also edged forward, their earlier mockery replaced by attentive observation. This next exercise will demonstrate scent detection and tracking, Wilson announced. He held up a small container. Inside is a trace amount of explosive material, less than a grain of sand. Trek's head tilted. Your scanning devices can detect this. No device, Lieutenant Miller replied. Just Max. Wilson concealed the container somewhere in the complex obstacle course, while Max waited in a transport vehicle with darkened windows. When Wilson returned, he gave a simple command. Max, seek. The German shepherd moved with methodical precision, his nose working the air currents. He ignored distractions planted throughout the course. Food, toys, even a recording of another dog barking. His focus remained absolute. One of the Varden scientists stepped forward, scanning device in hand. Our sensors detect nothing unusual in the air composition. Within 3 minutes, Max sat perfectly still in front of a stack of crates, staring at a specific point. His posture was rigid, the alert position. Wilson approached and carefully removed the tiny container hidden between 2 boxes. Target located, he announced. The Varden scientist checked his scanner again, moving it directly over the container. The device remained silent. Impossible, the scientist muttered. What technology is implanted in the animal? No technology, Wilson said, patting Max's side. Just 40 million olfactory receptors compared to a human's 5 million. Dogs can detect some substances in parts per trillion. Trek studied Max with new intensity. The beast has superior sensing capabilities to our technology. In some ways, yes, General Howard confirmed. We've tried to replicate it with machines for decades, but nothing beats a well-trained dog. Wilson continued the demonstration, showing how Max could distinguish between identical twins by scent, track a person's path from hours earlier, and detect hidden humans by their breath, even when concealed in sealed containers. Your Razor Claw is stronger and has natural weapons, Miller explained to Trek. But Max can do things no combat beast could ever accomplish. Trek watched as the dog carefully extracted a practice wounded soldier from a collapsed structure, gentle despite his power. The most remarkable aspect, Miller continued, is that Max does this because he wants to. He enjoys the work. Enjoys. Trek's translator seemed to struggle with the concept. Yes. Watch his tail. Max's tail wagged slightly as Wilson praised him for a successful exercise. That indicates happiness, Miller explained. Max works for praise, for play, and because he has formed a bond with his handler. The relationship benefits both of them. The demonstration shifted to showcase Max's discipline. Wilson placed a piece of meat on the ground and commanded Max to stay. The dog remained perfectly still, not touching the food despite clearly wanting it. A Varden warrior made a sharp movement toward Wilson, and Max growled but didn't move without command. Complete control without technology, Trek observed. Not control, Wilson corrected. Trust. To demonstrate, Wilson removed Max's tactical vest and all equipment, then stood at a distance and whispered a command barely audible to the humans present. Max immediately performed the requested action, retrieving a specific colored object from among dozens scattered across the field. How does it hear from such distance? A Varden warrior asked. Dogs hear frequencies humans can't, General Howard explained. Their entire sensory experience is different from ours. We've learned to communicate across that difference. Trek stepped closer to Max, towering over the dog. Max looked up, alert but not aggressive. "May I?" Trek hesitated, then extended a clawed hand. "May I touch it?" Wilson nodded. "Hold your hand out slowly, palm down." Trek did as instructed. Max sniffed the alien hand cautiously, then, to everyone's surprise, sat down calmly. "He's accepting you," Wilson explained. Trek gently placed one clawed finger on Max's head. The gesture was awkward but careful. "In 15 rotations of military command," Trek said quietly, "I have not seen a weapon that can also make peace." Miller smiled. "That's because Max isn't a weapon, Commander. He's a teammate, and that's what your razor claws can never be." For the first time since their arrival, Trek looked at the humans not with condescension, but with genuine curiosity. "I believe," Trek said slowly, "there is much more for us to learn about humans than we anticipated." Commander Trek stood with arms crossed as the complex obstacle course was assembled. Human engineers worked alongside Varden technicians, creating a series of challenges that would test both Max and the Razorclaw in comparable ways. "This final demonstration will be different," General Howard explained. "Both teams will face identical challenges requiring strength, intelligence, and tactical decisions." Trek nodded. "A fair competition. My warriors appreciate this opportunity." The course stretched across half a mile of desert. It included water obstacles, confined tunnels, climbing walls, and areas designed to test detection abilities. Most importantly, it featured a rescue zone, where each contestant would need to retrieve a dummy representing an injured team member while avoiding various hazards. Lieutenant Miller noticed Trek's second-in-command, a scared warrior named Greg, inspecting the final section with particular interest. "Your beast performed well earlier," Greg said, his tone less dismissive than before. "But this will require combat decisions. The Razorclaw was bred for war." Miller watched Max resting calmly in the shade. Max was trained for complex scenarios. It's not just about following commands. The spectator area had grown. News of the unusual competition had spread, and military personnel from both species gathered to watch. The atmosphere was tense but curious. The Razorclaw went first. Its handler, a Varden specialist, released it at the starting line and activated his control device. The beast charged forward with terrifying speed. It smashed through the first barriers, using raw power rather than finesse. In the water section, it swam with powerful strokes, its 6 limbs propelling it faster than any Earth predator could move. "Impressive," General Howard admitted. The course grew more challenging. The Razorclaw encountered sections requiring it to choose between multiple paths. Here, its handler sent commands through the control device, directing it toward specific routes. "The beast relies entirely on the handler's decisions," Miller observed quietly. Trek overheard him. "Of course. The Razorclaw has unmatched physical abilities, but strategic thinking belongs to the commander." The most revealing moment came at the rescue zone. The Razorclaw approached the dummy but struggled with the delicate extraction required. Its massive claws and powerful jaws, designed for destruction, made precision difficult. It ended up dragging the dummy roughly through hazards, causing damage that would have killed an actual wounded soldier. "Extraction complete," the Varden handler announced, though several observers winced at the dummy's condition. Trek's upper eyes narrowed slightly, but he said nothing. Then it was Max's turn. Wilson brought him to the starting line, spent a moment making eye contact with the dog, then simply said, "Course, Max. Find and save." Max moved differently than the Razorclaw. Where the alien beast had charged forward with brute force, Max assessed each obstacle before approaching it. He navigated the barriers with efficient movements, preserving his energy. At the water obstacle, He swam with less raw speed, but maintained a steady pace that actually resulted in a faster overall crossing time. Most surprising to the Vardens was when Max reached a section with multiple pathways. Without receiving commands, he paused, sniffed the air, and chose the optimal route, one that the Razorclaw had missed. "The animal is making decisions," Trek asked, mandibles clicking in surprise. "Yes," Wilson confirmed. "He's been trained to assess situations and use his judgment." In the rescue zone, Max demonstrated remarkable care. He located the dummy, carefully secured it by the reinforced clothing, and dragged it gently through the hazards, adjusting his path to avoid dangers that the Razorclaw had pushed through. When Max completed the course, the dummy was intact. The final times showed the Razorclaw had finished slightly faster, but with significant collateral damage that would have been catastrophic in a real scenario. Trek stood silently, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as he processed what he had witnessed. "Your canine," Trek finally said, using the human term, "lacks the raw power of our Razorclaw, but shows qualities we have never considered important in a combat asset." Miller nodded. "Sometimes strength isn't about how hard you can hit." "I begin to understand," Trek replied slowly. "Your beasts are extensions of yourselves, not just in combat, but in thinking." Wilson knelt beside Max, offering water and gentle praise. The bond between them was obvious to everyone watching. "Perhaps," Trek admitted, watching them, "there is wisdom in the human approach that we Vardens have overlooked." The diplomatic conference room had changed overnight. Where before the Vardens had arranged themselves in rigid military formation, now they sat in a more relaxed semicircle. Commander Trek had requested a cultural exchange session, words that surprised even General Howard. Lieutenant Miller entered with Sergeant Wilson and Max. The German shepherd padded quietly alongside his handler, his nails clicking softly on the polished floor. Several Varden warriors straightened in their seats, their 4 eyes tracking the dog with newfound respect. "Please," Trek said, gesturing to the open seats, "join us. I have many questions about your companion species." Wilson took a seat while Max settled at his feet, alert but calm. The Varden scientists had set up recording devices, and Trek's second-in-command, Grek, had brought physical notebooks, a sign of serious interest among their kind. "How long have humans worked with these animals?" Trek asked. Miller glanced at General Howard, who nodded for him to speak. "Archaeological evidence suggests at least 15,000 years, Miller explained. "Dogs were the first animals humans domesticated. Before your agriculture, before your cities." A Varden scientist leaned forward, mandibles twitching with interest. "Yes," Miller confirmed. "Our ancient ancestors were still nomadic hunters when the partnership began." Trek's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Partnership, not mastery. This distinction matters to humans." Wilson nodded. "Very much. Early wolves, the ancestors of dogs, likely approached human camps first. Those that were less afraid received food scraps. Over generations, they changed, becoming more social, more attuned to human emotions. And humans changed as well," Miller added. "We developed deeper capacity for bonding with other species." The relationship shaped both sides. A Varden warrior who had remained silent until now spoke up. "Our Razorclaws were created in laboratories, engineered from the fiercest predators on 3 worlds. Your dogs evolved with you." "Exactly," Wilson said. "Natural selection favored wolves that could understand human gestures, facial expressions, and eventually words. Today's dogs can read human emotions better than any other non-human species." To demonstrate, Wilson displayed a series of facial expressions: happiness, sadness, anger, fear. Max responded differently to each, offering comfort for sadness, alert attention for fear. "Remarkable," Trek murmured. "And this happened without genetic engineering. We did selectively breed dogs for different purposes once we understood genetics," Miller explained. "That's why we have various breeds for hunting, herding, protection, and companionship, but the fundamental ability to bond with humans developed naturally. The Varden scientist made rapid notes. Your civilization developed alongside another intelligent species then, not conquering them, but cooperating. Yes, General Howard confirmed, and that pattern repeated throughout human history. Our greatest advances often came from cooperation, not dominance. Trek stood and paced the room, his massive frame casting shadows as he passed beneath the lights. The Varden Imperium was built on conquest, he said finally. We measure strength by the ability to subdue others. Our razor claws embody this philosophy. They are living weapons that obey without question. But yesterday, Grek added, we saw different strength. Your beast, your partner, showed intelligence, restraint, and independent decision-making, while still following your guidance. Wilson nodded. Max chooses to work with me because of our bond. Force and fear could never produce the same results. Trek stopped pacing and looked down at Max, who returned his gaze calmly. In all our conquests, Trek said slowly, we have never encountered a species that achieved power through partnership rather than domination. It is unfamiliar ground. Miller smiled. Perhaps that's why first contact is so valuable. We learn new ways to see the universe. Trek lowered himself to one knee, a significant gesture for the heavily armored alien, and extended a hand toward Max. The dog looked to Wilson, who nodded permission. Max sniffed Trek's clawed hand, then allowed the alien commander to gently touch his head. Your civilization evolved alongside these companions, Trek said, wonder evident in his voice. Perhaps that is why humans think so differently from Vardens. You learned cooperation before you learned conquest. It shaped everything about us, General Howard confirmed. Our empathy, our social structures, our approach to problems. Trek rose to his full height. I must report this understanding to the Imperium. We have much to reconsider about humans. The room fell silent as both species realized a fundamental shift had occurred. The Vardens had arrived expecting to find weakness in humanity's collaborative nature. Instead, they discovered a strength their own civilization had never developed. Perhaps, Trek said as he looked down at Max, there is more than one path to power among the stars. The desert air carried a different feeling on the final day of the Varden delegation's visit. The massive alien ship no longer seemed quite so intimidating against the blue Earth sky. Flags from both species fluttered side by side at the diplomatic compound. Lieutenant Miller arrived early to find Commander Trek already waiting in the observation area. The Varden leader stood watching Sergeant Wilson and Max training in the distance. Good morning, Commander, Miller said, joining Trek at the railing. Lieutenant Miller, Trek acknowledged, his four eyes not leaving the dog and handler. I have been observing them since sunrise. Fascinating. In the training field, Wilson tossed a ball for Max, who bounded after it with obvious joy. When he returned, Wilson took a moment to ruffle the dog's fur before continuing with more structured exercises. The training includes play. Trek asked, mandibles clicking softly in curiosity. Always, Miller confirmed. It strengthens their bond and keeps Max engaged. A happy dog works better than a fearful one. Trek's upper eyes narrowed in thought. We never considered enjoyment as a factor in combat effectiveness. The other diplomats and military personnel began arriving for the formal signing of the first treaty between Earth and the Varden Imperium. What had begun as tense military posturing had evolved into the foundation for genuine alliance. General Howard approached with the Varden diplomatic team. We're ready to begin the ceremony whenever you are, Commander. Trek nodded but seemed reluctant to leave his observation post. A few more moments, if acceptable. In the field, Wilson was now demonstrating search techniques with Max, hiding objects, and guiding the dog with subtle hand signals. The Varden scientists recorded everything, their earlier dismissal replaced by earnest study. Your report to the Imperium, Miller asked carefully. How was it received? Trek turned his massive head, with disbelief at first, then with great interest. The High Command has instructed me to establish a permanent exchange program. We wish to learn more about human-animal partnerships. And the Razor Claws. Trek made a sound Miller now recognized as thoughtful consideration. They will remain part of our forces, but your K9 units have shown us limitations in our approach. We have begun research into forming more cooperative relationships with our bioengineered creatures. The formal ceremony began with speeches from both sides. What struck Miller most was the change in Trek's language. Where the commander had once spoken only of strength and dominance, he now emphasized mutual benefit and complementary capabilities. After the treaty was signed, Trek made an unexpected announcement. The Varden Imperium wishes to establish a joint training facility where our warriors can learn from human K9 handlers. In return, we offer access to our defensive technology and star charts. General Howard looked genuinely surprised. We accept with gratitude, Commander. As the formalities concluded, Trek approached Wilson and Max one final time. Sergeant Wilson, with your permission, I would like to present something to your partner. Wilson nodded, curious. Trek removed a small emblem from his armor, a symbol of high rank among the Vardens. With surprising gentleness, the alien commander attached it to Max's tactical vest. Max is hereby recognized as a warrior of exceptional merit by the Varden Imperium, Trek announced formally, the first non-Varden to receive such honor. The assembled humans broke into applause. Max, sensing the positive atmosphere, wagged his tail and sat at perfect attention. I never expected this outcome when you first landed, Miller admitted to Trek as they watched the celebration. Nor did I, Trek replied. We came seeking potential conquest and found instead potential allies. Your species has much to teach mine. As the Varden delegation prepared to board their ship, Trek paused at the ramp and looked back at the humans and their canine companions. Lieutenant Miller, your ancient ancestors made a wise choice when they extended friendship instead of dominance to another species. That choice shaped your civilization in ways you may not fully appreciate. Miller smiled, watching Max receive attention from both human and Varden admirers. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from unexpected connections. Trek's 4 eyes blinked in agreement. Indeed, the stars hold many dangers, Lieutenant. Both our peoples will face them better together than alone. The massive ship rose into the blue Earth sky, no longer a symbol of intimidation, but of new possibilities. On the ground, Max watched it depart, sitting calmly beside his human partner, the unexpected ambassador who had helped 2 species find common ground. As Trek had observed, sometimes the universe's most important lessons come in unexpected packages, even in the form of what humans simply called man's best friend.